All right, so good morning to you all. Today we're going to continue with exercise 125, but that pairs up really nicely with assignment 106, which is kind of where we're going for most of the class. So assignment 106 is your last assignment other than the final portfolio, which you already have. So that technically is 107. This is due on the Wednesday before the last day of class. So your final portfolio is due on Monday the 22nd of May. This assignment is due on the last regular day of class, which is Wednesday the 17th. As part of this assignment, you're going to, using the same program, build your cabin retreat in 3 dimensions rather than just in AutoCAD. It does not have to be the exact same building. It can evolve from the one that you did. You may learn, actually, usually people learn a lot about the roof lines once they bring it into 3D. So I'm expecting some evolution. That's to be expected. We're going to be creating we will be creating 4 total views in class, 3 of which you need to turn in for your assignment 106. So we'll do a elevation, we'll do a plan, we'll do a section, and we'll do a perspective of this particular building. In order to do those views, you obviously have to build the building. So today you'll spend the time working on building the building. I think you're all fairly quick in SketchUp, so it shouldn't be too hard to get it there. I am not worried at all about putting materials on in SketchUp because we're going to do all of the material work, etc., in Photoshop after the fact. So you don't have to worry about materials. We just need the geometry. That's the important thing. If you want to include furniture, objects, things that you get from the 3D warehouse in SketchUp, that's okay with me. You don't have to build everything yourself, but when we bring it in, you'll obviously decide what's appropriate to include and what's not in your Photoshop part. So it should be fairly self-explanatory. I try to do a lot of the work for this last bit in class, so we'll have a day where we do elevations. We'll have a day where we do sections, so that because you have so much else going on, you shouldn't need to spend too much time outside. That being said, you still have that final portfolio, remember? If you wait until the last week to do your final portfolio, it won't turn out well, and you won't get a good grade on it. So you need to be working on it as we go. We will spend another day in class talking about it, reviewing it. I'll talk about cover design, etc. But you should be working on it on your own. Remember, it's the final project. It's your responsibility. It's not something that we do in class. It's for you to put together. Of course, if you want me to review it, you want me to look at it, I'm happy to do that. But it's not, we don't have enough class time for me to devote more days than the ones that I already have. So today we're going to work on exercise 125. And you guys already have a plan and or some elevations that you did in AutoCAD. And it seems like a waste to start from scratch in SketchUp and not use the AutoCAD drawings that you already have. So I'm going to talk today about the ways of bringing in AutoCAD documents into SketchUp. And I'll talk a lot about why SketchUp's really cranky about it. It works a lot easier if you bring an AutoCAD drawing into Rhino and work with it. The process into SketchUp is a little tricky. But we're going to go through that because I think it's a relevant thing to talk about. So I've opened up my exercise 122, and we're going to go ahead and switch from the paper space view into the model space view. So this should be the full scale version. Should look something like this with the folded out elevations. If I were to take this file and bring it directly into SketchUp, there's significantly too much information for what I'm trying to do. And so we need to kind of simplify things and concentrate on just the important pieces before we bring it into SketchUp. Because if we don't, the SketchUp process is going to be very, very difficult. So a couple things that are important. One, we need to get rid of all the blocks. So all these furniture blocks, etc., get rid of them. So before I get on this process, I would go ahead and do a save as, and we'll put it into today's folder, which is 125. And we'll call this OK, so now that I have this version that I'm going to start to strip down, I need to get rid of stuff that doesn't matter so much. So we'll go through and we'll delete things that are irrelevant, blocks, etc. The goal here is to end up with just the walls and the windows. I don't even want these swinging doors. I'll leave the doorway openings. So the easiest way of doing this is just to go through your drawing, and I'm pressing the delete key right now. Go ahead and get rid of these. The windows are a little, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of them and just leave the divisions in the walls. All right, that looks pretty good. Let me double check up here. Oh, I got a little bit more. So this cleaning process is absolutely critical before you move into SketchUp, because all of these objects affect how SketchUp works, and they become interconnected when we start moving into SketchUp. So it's important to do this cleaning first. These guys, we'll get rid of these. All right, so that looks pretty clean. My elevations, I'm going to go ahead and leave those. I think they're probably OK, like that. OK, so now that I have this cleaned up a little bit, it also wouldn't hurt me to clean up the layers a bit. If there's any layers that don't have objects on them, I should be able to get rid of them. This is always a little iffy in AutoCAD because sometimes it'll let you delete them, sometimes it won't. So I'm going to go ahead and try to delete these and see. Sometimes you get this. Layer was not deleted because it contains objects or something like that. And so sometimes you just can't really do it. I'll go ahead and assume that I'm OK for right now, and we'll look at it when we get into SketchUp. Worst case is I can come back. So let me save this work. And SketchUp 2017 should allow AutoCAD to come right in. If it doesn't, you might have to do a save as and change the AutoCAD 2013 drawing type to be an earlier version. I'm going to assume that it's going to work out OK. So let me jump over into SketchUp. I've already opened up SketchUp 2017. I'm going to go ahead and delete the little person because I don't need the person. And then I'm going to go to File and then Import. And then I'll go and look for that file that I just saved. Oops. I will have to change my file type to be AutoCAD. And there it is. I have the stripped down plan and section. I'll go ahead and click on Options just to confirm. The rest of this is fine. It says the units are in feet. The units in AutoCAD are in inches, so I want to make sure I make that correction. They're in inches. And we'll go ahead and say OK there, and then import. Now this import can take a little bit of time. And so we see a little progress bar, and we'll hope that it worked out fairly well. All right, and it should tell us this little import results. It'll tell you how many things it brought in. We'll go ahead and click on Close. And if I zoom out, it now brought in my building here. I'm going to double check before I do too much. And I'm going to use the Measure tool to measure and make sure that my building is the size that it's supposed to be. Yeah, 15 feet. OK, I'm happy. So I wanted to make sure that that was the case before I got too involved in it. So let's take a look now at the Layers drawer over here on the right side. If I click on it, we can see layers that came in from AutoCAD. There they are. We need to go through and delete unnecessary layers. So we don't need the viewport layer. We can click the little minus sign. We don't need the no print layer. Chances are we don't even need the doors layer because I deleted the doors. So let's go ahead and delete that. Oops, hold on a second. So in this, delete layers containing entities, we can either move the contents to one layer or we can delete the contents altogether. I don't know what's included in this, so I'm going to move it onto hold on a second. Let's see here. Let me get rid of the CAD blocks, delete contents, delete contents. Most of these you can delete the contents. The walls layer, obviously, if we were to turn it off, you can see that, yeah, that's important. The walls are important. The kitchen, there's nothing in there. Oh, there's a few windows that are there. So we want to delete the kitchen layer, but move the contents. Let's make the walls layer current. So I'm going to click this little dot next to walls to make it the current layer. And then when I delete the kitchen layer here, I'm going to say move contents to current layer. And that way they're on that walls layer. Flooring doesn't matter. We'll get rid of that. The text doesn't matter. We can delete the contents of the text. Furnishings don't matter. We can get rid of that. The roof, let's take a quick look and see what it is. OK, there's a few lines. Those might be helpful. We'll go ahead and leave the roof. But I'm going to delete the layer and move it onto the wall layer. The windows, yep, there's a little bit of windows. Let's go ahead and when we delete it, we're going to move it onto the walls layer. Layer 1, I have no idea what's on layer 1. Nothing important, so we'll get rid of that. The guides layer, we can get rid of that. When I get rid of the doors layer, I'm going to move it onto the walls layer. So you see I'm paring this down into as few of layers as possible. So now I have the topography layer, I have the walls layer, and I have the elevations layer. Layer 0, I believe, is the default layer in SketchUp, and it's got a few guides on it. We can leave that. I'll make it invisible for right now. Now let me zoom out. So the first thing that I want is I want to turn off everything but the topography. Oops. Make the topography active. I'll turn off walls. I'll turn off elevations. So I have just the topography. I'm going to take the topography, select all of it, and with all the topography selected, I'm going to right-click on it and say Make Component. Now, a component is a lot like a group in SketchUp. The difference is that we can go in and make some edits to that component as its own entity, and it will live as its own object. So I'm going to go ahead and make a component out of it. We'll name this component topography. And I'll go ahead and say create. And let it go for a little longer. All right, so that just made a component out of the topography. Now I'll turn back on the walls, turn off the topography. And on the walls layer here, I'm going to select everything and do the same thing. I'll right-click and say Make Component. And this is the walls. And I'll say Create. That one goes pretty fast. We'll turn off the walls and turn on the elevations. Looks like I missed a few little pieces here. Those should have been on the topography. We'll just get rid of those. All right. Now I'm going to do each of the elevations separately. So this is the first one. I'll right-click and say Make Component. And this is going to be the south elevation. And I'll create. I'll right-click on this, Make Component. This is the east elevation. This is the north elevation. And Make Component. And this is the west elevation. Now, by making these all components, I can use them as their own individual object, and they're not going to glue to anything else as I start to create it. So let's create another new layer. We're going to call this layer 3D house or something like that. 3D cabin, it should be. I'm going to make that the active layer. And it does not need to be a weird yellow color. All right. And so now we can turn back on the walls, and I'm going to leave the topography off for right now. And I'm going to start to actually build this out a little bit. So let's look at this piece here, which is again a component. I'll start by drawing a line around my object. So I'm essentially using this as a guide. And when I complete that, I end up with the shape of my floor plan here. So I'm going to go ahead and go into this like that, which will allow me to get rid of this piece and that line. And I've got one more, excuse me, sorry, one more little piece right there. And I can get rid of that as well. The reason that I worked through and made these components is that if I had these just as lines, they'd have a tendency not to divide up correctly. I can always attempt to use this to divide up my lines by right-clicking on my component and saying explode. And when I do that, it may or may not divide my surface. And you can see here it divided some of the pieces, but not all of the pieces. So I'd end up having to trace anyway. So to me, it's a little bit easier to keep this as one unit and to just use this piece as a little bit of a guide. And then you can kind of carefully control what parts are divided from what other parts. You can use the rectangle tool. So here, for example, I have a rectangular wall. We can draw that in. And now that piece will be separate from everything else. I can also draw in, we can trace right here. Like that, and now that becomes its own separate entity. It also means that these walls are now starting to become separate. So let me trace from there to there, and now that wall is separate. Let me trace from there to there. And so you can see how I'm starting to break this into different pieces. And it takes a little bit of tracing to do it. Now, it would be helpful to know some of the elevation marks as well. So what I can do is I can take one of these side elevation components like this, and I'd like to rotate it up into the 3 dimensions that it needs to be in. Now, rotating it in SketchUp can be a little challenging. So it gives us this little protractor thing, but it's hard to get it to rotate in the view we want it to do. So one way of kind of cheating the system a little bit is to draw close to your object a little box. We'll use push-pull and give that a little bit of dimension. Then we can select all of it, including the box, use the rotate tool on the side of the box, and bring it right up. After you're done, we can select the box and not the wall, and press delete. So now that's in its correct orientation. Now I need to make sure that this lines up with my floor plan at the correct plane. So I know that the floor in my particular building lines up to this level right here or the bottom of these windows, because these are floor-to-ceiling windows. So I'll draw a line from here out along the green axis. So you see how when I drew that line, I waited until it was green before I clicked OK. When I do that, it now gives me what level that is. Now I can take this particular elevation and I can move it. I'll use the move tool. I know it would line up to this point right here. I can move that down, and I want it to be on the blue axis if I can see it here. Sometimes it takes a little bit to see it. There it is on the blue axis. Come on, snap for me. well, as long as it's on this line, it doesn't really matter. So that height now lines up correctly for where my floor plan is. Does that make sense? So I'm getting this kind of established. So let me do it for the other views. Start with the box, push, pull, select all of it, rotate, there we go. Same thing here. I need to know what a particular floor is, which might be a little bit hard on this side view. So I may end up having to reference one of the heights here. So that, for example, I could, by the way, I could use guides instead of just lines. I have a tendency to get stuck into just using lines, but it is something that you could choose to use if you would rather. Okay, so let me go ahead and I'm just going to draw this off into space like this. That's going to line up over the top of this, so we'll be able to go right up to right there, and then we can come out. This time it'll be in the red direction like that. And now I need to move this so that that lines up right there. So I use the upper line rather than the lower line to establish that view, except that yeah, that's correct. Okay, so then I can do it for this view. You get the idea. The advantage of pulling up these elevations like this is when it comes time to actually pull up a wall. So for example, that wall right there, I know what height it needs to be because I have a reference point over here. So let me go ahead and use push-pull on that wall, and I'll bring it up to match that point, which is the height of my little piece there. Then I could work and build up this next piece. Now, this piece has to be cut off from the rest of these walls, so give me a second to trace it there. Oops. All right, so now this is a separate piece. Whoops. Sorry, we need to break that. This is its own separate piece, and I can now use push-pull on that to match up with that height right there. So you see how I'm working my way around using the elevations as references for my own work. So obviously, as I start to build these up, I'm not going to make you watch me build the whole building. I'm just going to go a little bit further. Right? I'll do push-pull on this one, and that's going to match up with that as well. Okay. I need to create the little roof that goes across here. So at that point, I can just start to draw on my building here. There. 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 So you see how I created that little roof piece. I need to know where this is, so we can draw this back to right there. I can pull that over. Let's go ahead and draw this over to this side. There. Go from there, there. We can delete this so we can see inside it. That. It still needs to be filled in. So we'll draw from right there to right there and fill that piece in. So there's still a little bit of artifacting. So this piece, for example, can go away. Likewise, this piece can go away, and that piece can go away to create that solid top. This piece here can go away. This piece here can go away. And that piece there can go away. So you see how I'm kind of working my way from the elevation views to the side views and creating this shape. Obviously, I'm missing a piece of the door here, a piece of the wall. So I can just do a box from here to there. And it already filled in on that side. I don't have the corresponding piece on this side. So let me go ahead and drag this to there. Okay, come on. Sometimes it doesn't want to do what you want it to do. There we go, right there, to fill in that particular section. Once again, there's a few extra superfluous lines. These aren't critical that you get rid of, but it starts to make the inner wall a little bit cleaner if you do get rid of those pieces. Every once in a while, you'll end up with one of these that when you delete it, it will delete the whole wall, in which case just leave it in place. It's one of the challenges of working in the world of SketchUp is sometimes that's just the way it's going to work. Right? This piece can go away. That. And so you can see how I was able to create this little alcove by using a combination of my AutoCAD drawing. It's not perfect. In the world of Rhino, for example, we can bring these drawings in much like I did. But we can use them to do projections, and suddenly you have it all on your object. It doesn't quite work as clean in SketchUp. Generally, it's best if you leave these as components and then trace over them to build your various shapes. It's still a lot better than drawing it from scratch. You have something to trace, and it's relatively easy to build the pieces up. So what I want you to do today is to work on building this building, get as much of it done as you can so that we're ready to move on and start doing elevations, plans, sections, and those kinds of things. So you have the rest of the day to work on it. That gives you a couple hours at least. I would expect it to be almost done, if not done, by the end of class today. Are there any questions about what I did? No? All right.